This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
For us at Kiwibank, we are really lucky that we have a really clear purpose around Kiwi making Kiwi better off, and that goes all the way back to over 20 years ago when someone said, wouldn't it be great if New Zealand had a bank which could be a challenger to the big four Australian banks, and we think that Kiwi would actually be better off if we had that challenger bank. And I think what connects us all here at Kiwibank, and probably many of our customers, is actually that sense of purpose. What we've been really intentional about is asking ourselves, what is the best culture which will deliver on that purpose, so that we can create a culture where everyone can be successful and deliver on our purpose and our strategy. One of the reasons I joined Kiwibank is because I believed in that purpose and I wanted to contribute to it. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people have joined Kiwibank. So in that way, I think we have a bit of a head start from a wellbeing perspective because we have that clear purpose and that clear sense of meaning that is really alive for us.
Hello and welcome back to this second episode of the Making Work Better series. Most of us realise that it's time to stop fracking human resources and to make work humanly sustainable. To help us work out how we can do that, I've been on a quest to find the workplaces that are actually succeeding at making work better for people and performance, and to bring you their stories and their strategies. I'm Dr. Denise Quinlan, and today I'm joined by Charlotte Ward, who leads People and Culture at Kiwibank, New Zealand's only locally owned and led bank. Kiwibank is an organisation that at its very heart believes in taking care of its people. I believe every workplace can learn from the strategies and actions that they've put in place. And that is why I'm so delighted to welcome Charlotte Ward, Kiwibank's Chief People Officer. Charlotte, welcome. Great to talk to you today.
Thank you. Great to be here and always love talking about wellbeing.
So in the survey last year, the challenges that are just sitting right up there for most people, saying that the challenges their organizations are most concerned about are burnout, well-being and resilience, workplace culture, engagement, recruitment and retention, uncertainty and change, and the ability to innovate. So there will be no surprises there. We wanted to come on and talk about some of the work that organizations are doing. And I'm really excited to talk to you, particularly because I guess Kiwibank is doing really interesting work around culture, around purpose and meaningful work, around the structure of work. You know, sometimes it's some of the small things we do, like changing the length of time of a default meeting, that really changes people's days. Your work on benefits, on values, all of this is really interesting. So I guess before we dive into it, I kind of want to ask, I want to frame this discussion up as what are the people challenges that Kiwibank believes are most important for your organization and the approach that you've taken to tackle some of these challenges.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to have a conversation. Your research sounds absolutely fascinating. I'm looking forward to learning more about it as we go. It's interesting, that question, because there's a few different entry points into it, but I think how we are thinking about both our challenges and opportunity is through the lens of culture. And what is our culture in service of? And for us at Kiwibank, we are really lucky that we have a really clear purpose around Kiwi making Kiwi better off, and that goes all the way back to over 20 years ago when someone said, wouldn't it be great if New Zealand had a bank which could be a challenger to the big four Australian banks, and we think that Kiwi would actually be better off if we had that challenger bank. And I think what connects us all here at Kiwibank, and probably many of our customers, is actually that sense of purpose. And I think from a psychological point of view, when we're talking about wellbeing, that's actually really important, that we do have a very clear purpose. And what we've been really intentional about is asking ourselves what is the best culture which will deliver on that purpose, so that we can create a culture where everyone can be successful and deliver on our purpose and our strategy. And we think that all of those things can be done at the same time. So it's performance through purpose, we're not weighing them up against each other. We're actually recognising that it's the same thing, and that's what we're trying to do.
And so kind of flipping that round, that is that saying that one of the fundamental challenges many organizations are facing is, how do we provide meaningful work? How do we connect people to purpose? How do we make work feel relevant, useful, and fulfilling? Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely think so. And I think, one of the reasons I joined Kiwibank is because I believed in that purpose and I wanted to contribute to it. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people have joined Kiwibank. So in that way, I think we have a bit of a head start from a wellbeing perspective, because we have that clear purpose and that clear sense of meaning that is really alive for us.
And I guess from a wellbeing perspective, the interesting thing is that strong sense of purpose and mission can be a double-edged sword, because when people have that, and I say it as, it's the same is true for anyone working in the wellbeing field. It's really easy to overwork and push ourselves too far to the point of burnout. So we'll come to that later on. But first of all, tell us about how you've approached the challenge of culture.
And so, yes, it follows on quite naturally, actually, from that discussion about purpose. And I've been with Kiwibank since 2020, and that's also about the time we were separating from New Zealand Post and setting ourselves a really challenging transformation agenda for the next sort of 5 years. So it was a really good time to be able to ask ourselves, how are we going to create a culture where we can be really successful, and what does sort of successful mean? So we took an appreciative inquiry approach where we went and asked all of our people, which was over 2,200 people, to have a conversation with us around culture. And we asked them 2 questions. One of them was, what are you doing when you're doing your best work? And what do you think we will be doing if in 5 years' time we have been successful in delivering on our purpose and strategy? What will that look like? What will that feel like? So we asked people to get really specific about those things. And we had a really big conversation, got lots of data points, over 20,000 data points about what that looks like for our people and what they really need to be successful. And that's how we got our culture, actually. And we also got a whole lot of information about what enables our culture and what could get in the way of our culture as well. And from that, we got our 4 mindsets. So we're very much using Ed Shine's culture model of needing to actually intervene at the mindset level, not just the sort of what you say or what you see level too. And we looked at these 4 mindsets. One of those mindsets, which we start with because we think it's the most important thing you need to have in place, is a place for us to belong. So ka tīmata aia tātou, and that's got so many elements of it which I think are critical to wellbeing, around that psychological safety, around feeling like you can be yourself, around feeling like you can be authentic. And for us, what follows for our mindsets is better together, tapatahi, rise to the challenge, me maia, and ngākere customer focus. But what we realised by putting that place to belong at the very start is you actually can't have any of those things unless you've got those that mindset from the start.
And I think I often, when I talk about this in psychological safety terms, I describe it as the safe ground of belonging on which all else is built.
Absolutely. And that's exactly how we thought about it. And the conversation sort of went, well, we're all about our customers and we want to be customers' first choice. So maybe that should be first. But the data, what our people were saying is, actually, for me to be my best at work and for me to be able to successfully deliver on our purpose, I need that foundation level, and I'm at my best when I feel like I belong.
And it's interesting because I guess 2 things crop up for me here. One is that I'm so excited by the fact that you talk to almost 2,000 people. This is, you said 87% of your people. It's a huge amount. And taking an appreciative inquiry lens and actually genuinely interacting and having a conversation with your people is both a wellbeing intervention and a large structural commitment to engaging people. So that's not to be sniffed at, in terms of, there are a lot of organizations that could say, oh, we've revamped our culture or cultural values. And it happened in head office over the week with some consultants. This is an entirely different process. And I really just want to underscore that for people, that this is a genuine conversation that involved people, that got everybody thinking about the future, the challenges, what they really want to commit to. And I just think that's a hugely significant part of the way you've been working.
I absolutely agree. And I think what I'd highlight there as well is that it didn't stop there, and it couldn't stop there either. So one of the critical pieces that we did next was figure out how we're going to track our progress and measure and keep listening. So we put in place and it's great in these days, we have these wonderful ways which we can look at culture and engagement, but we were actually specifically chose one which we could customize to those specific mindsets which we had selected, and track our progress along the way, but not just track our progress, but keep getting feedback and keep listening and saying, what are we doing well and what are we not doing well? And let's keep having that conversation in a slightly different way, but let's keep having that conversation about how you're thinking about it and feeling about it and what action we're taking along the way, so that it's a live conversation at all times.
And I guess to let's go with that then. In terms of how you are listening and the feedback and tracking progress, what's that telling you?
So it's telling us that we are continuing to improve our culture. So we took a baseline measure, and actually the one that we use, which is called Glint, tracks you against, other Glint populations around the world. We're in the top quartile against those populations. And from a score perspective, we keep improving and increasing on all measures, including wellbeing. But what's really important to me is the participation and the comments that we get as well. So we continually get really high participation, which suggests that people feel like they are being heard. So that is almost even more important to me than the culture. And the culture question, by the way, is, do we have the culture to be successful in delivering on our purpose and strategy? So that's the headline question. And then there's a number of different elements to do with our mindsets that relates to that. And then we've got comments too. And there, what are we doing well and we're not doing well? And whenever I start thinking, oh no, I'm worried, the score keeps going up, are people still telling us the truth? I look at the comments, I'm like, oh no, yes, they are telling us the truth.
And what kind of comments do people make? What are the comments that light your eyes up?
The comments that actually light my eyes up, and last year I read out one of the comments to people to kind of, because I thought it was such a good summary, which was along the lines of, I'm excited about how far we've still got to go, but the progress we've made is amazing. And I think that makes me really happy, because it recognises the journey that we're on together, and that everybody is actually really committed to this journey of culture we are on together. And I'm always really careful to emphasise that it's actually every single person that's part of it. It's not just, something that I'm doing or something that our CE is doing, even though we're both super committed to it. It's actually something we're all on a journey together. So that sort of makes me excited. And
to circle back to your earlier comment of when you were designing these nakawaka, the vessels, the cultural vessels that were the cornerstones really of how you're working. It would have been tempting to put customers first, but you didn't. You put staff first. And that feels to me like it's part of a larger shift in the organizational landscape, where I think we would have, under I don't want to say extreme forms, but under what has been the traditional form of shareholder capitalism in the last few decades, it's been the shareholders, and the customers, and then the staff and the community in which this organization is embedded, coming a very poor third and fourth. And I think, this is what people are talking about with the shift to stakeholder capitalism, of saying we have to be organizations that recognize the importance of the people who are producing the result. That it's not, we don't exist to produce a shareholder return, and they're not the be all and end all. And how does that sit with the Kiwibank ethos?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. We talk about performance through purpose, but what you're saying also resonates with me. We are a B Corp organisation as well. So we are very much reversing the script, I guess, that you just talked about, which is actually, if we see ourselves in the community, in the world, we focus on our purpose and our people, then actually we know then that we'll be doing the right thing for our customers, and the performance will then take care of itself because we're doing all the right stuff at the front.
What difference do you think it makes to Kiwibank staff that you are a B Corp?
I think it's part of it. I don't think it's and I think this is to your point at the start of, we didn't do that just to tick something off. I think it's just part of how we approach things and the way that we think about our place in the world and what our purpose is. So we know that our people really value purpose. So whenever we do our culture and our engagement surveys, being proud of our purpose and being connected to the meaningful purpose makes a big difference to our people. And I think B Corp is one of those. If you think about culture, I think it's one of the symbols of that culture. So I think it does mean a lot from a symbol point of view. It's not the full underlying mindset piece, but it's a really important way that we evidence that.
Yeah, and that you're not driven by quarterly returns.
Yeah.
Quarterly results driving share price, and yeah. Well,
I mean, if you think about it, then we think that will come. You take care of your people, and your people take care of your customers, and your customers take care of the results.
It seems such a simple, logical thing to say, and yet for many organizations that would represent a radical transformation. So coming back to the journey that Kiwibank has been on and is on, there's so many interesting things. I'm scrolling through a list here. So the work around cultural values and purpose, you were saying that's kind of the lens through which a lot of the work has been happening. Has that driven other change?
Yes, and I mean, I think it's the cultural lens that's driven the change, and also just the constant listening to our people. I think that's probably really our secret, I guess, for knowing what the right thing is to do at any given moment, is the feedback that we get from people. So, last year the talent market was really challenging. It was really hard to get people and keep people because the talent market was so hot. So we could go to the feedback that we were getting from our people about what is it that's great about working here that makes you stay, and what could we do even better. And that's where we were able to come up with some things that we knew would make a real difference to our people, and actually they tied into wellbeing. So things that we put in place for purposes of keeping our people, as well as taking care of our people, were actually directly linked to wellbeing. So we put in place wellbeing leave, which is every quarter on a take it or leave it sort of basis. People get a wellbeing day to do with whatever they like as a result of that. And
hang on, say that again, because I think we always assume that it's just added on to people's leave. Say that again, just so I get it in my head.
So I think this is a really important piece for me on wellbeing, is every quarter you have a day and you need to use it. Because if you don't use it, it disappears. It's a every quarter piece. And I think that's important from a wellbeing point of view, because it gives you that regular check-in that if you just have another day that you add to your annual leave, because what we heard from people is, I'm so busy, I'm so engaged in my work that actually I'm not even taking my leave.
Yeah.
And actually, I think a lot of organisations heard this over COVID, and that is a problem. So what if you had a day where you could do whatever you wanted for yourself, for your well-being? And we encourage people, and I always talk about how I just do it for myself. I don't do it with my kids. I don't do, extra admin jobs. I just focus on my well-being. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So, of course, we do have, usage in the 90s because people will use it and actually take it. Whereas if it just added onto your annual leave, then the danger is it just gets filed away. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really important. I think also one of the things we changed, which a lot of organisations probably had to deal with over COVID, is that sort of line between sick leave for yourself and, well, first of all, what do you do if you're sick for more than 10 days? And second of all, what if it's actually your dependents or other reasons which are really justifiable that you have to be away from work? Mm-hmm. What if we bunch all of those together and just call it supported leave? That's leave that we'll support you for, because it's important for your well-being and for you to be your best at work. You need to have access to those days where you actually need to be doing something else, and we trust you to use those in a genuine way when you really need them.
And so is supported leave the sum total of what was annual holiday leave, potential for bereavement leave?
It's not annual leave. It's not annual leave. It's not bereavement leave. So increased bereavement leave as well to up to 5 days. It's sick leave, compassionate leave, and domestic leave, all tied up together.
Sick leave, compassionate leave, domestic leave.
Yeah. So your annual leave is a separate thing. So but supported leave is just available when you need it, obviously within reason, giving you peace of mind. So if you're sick, or if dependents are sick, or if it could even be extended bereavement leave if you need more than 5 days as well. So there is manager discretion there.
Typically, how much supported leave do people get?
Well, they take it when they need it, right? So the sick leave of 10 days is a good finger in the air, and we know that not everybody uses 10 days anyway. But we do have people when we launched it, I had a lot of people coming to me saying how important it was to them because they had a long-term illness. If you have cancer or if you have something like that, then you're going to take more than 10 days. And we're sort of saying, we understand that, but we're here to support you.
And so the understanding is some people will not take the full 10 days and some people will need more, and that will be okay.
And that will be okay. That's right. And in the same way, it needs to be genuine. It operates on a sort of trust. And so, as with anything, there might be people that would take more than they really needed, and that would be dealt with as a not genuine, or we do sort of look at it. But we actually haven't had any issues with it of people abusing that, because I think that it's the trust that exists there.
The issue is the same one that comes up always with people who are opposed to remote working. Oh, but how will you know who isn't working? And the answer is always the same. You know anyway, don't you? You know who is working and who isn't working, when they're in the office, and it's the same when they're not. You can tell by output. There's so many, managers know their staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said for that sort of give and get model of, a psychological contract that you have with people of, we offer so much, but you also need to, the other person offers, and then you expect in return. Yeah. And everybody's got that offer and expect, or give and get sort of model. And you're right, I think the flexible working and sick leave or not sick leave or supported leave all operates on that same just basic level of trust of actually I'm here to do a really good job, and I do believe that everybody is there in the most part to do the best job they can, and we need to set in place the right environment for them to be able to do that job.
And it is interesting, isn't it? Because so trust has, I don't know, become like an old-fashioned word. And I've heard people say, oh no, organizational trust isn't a thing. Trust is between people. And I'm like, whoa, no. People need to be able to trust in their organization, to behave ethically, to be aligned with the purpose they're comfortable with. This anyway, I think we do ourselves a disservice as human beings if we assume that trust doesn't operate in the workplace.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I mean, I think it goes to integrity and reliability. You want to believe that your organisation or whoever's representing your organisation is reliable and consistent and
caring and
will show you compassion and all of those things that are elements of trust have to be present within the organisation for that healthy sort of place to belong, psychological relationship, I think. And you would know better than me, but I would suspect that trust would be a pretty critical element of wellbeing, in terms of needing to be in place for someone to feel truly
it's
like
about
their wellbeing is being taken care of.
And you want to feel that you belong. It sits right in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. How can you have psychological safety really without trust?
Yeah. You don't. Yeah. You don't. You have hypervigilance and wariness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but coming back to some of the other changes that Kiwibank have made that I was really excited about, I know you shifted your default meeting lengths online from an hour to 50 minutes, which is a stroke of brilliance. Tell me how that came about.
I think, it's a good question how it came about, actually. I think it was definitely in the conversation of wellbeing and how can we make sure that we're not just in this constant, again, when you talk to people about what gets in the way, people will often say meetings. I'm just so busy. I'm in this busyness culture, and that I'm sure we weren't alone in that. I hear that all the time, I'm just back-to-back meetings and I don't even have time to go to the toilet or get myself a glass of water. And so there were two things actually we did as a result of that, like actually what could we do to help that sort of feeling of being overwhelmed or being at capacity. One of them was reducing the meeting times, and the other piece that we looked at the same time was meeting principles. So how do you make sure that when you're in a meeting, you're not feeling like you're just wasting your time? You're asking sensible questions like, do I have to be there? And then if I do have to be there, is there a really clear agenda? Is everybody able to contribute in a way that makes them feel included and safe and lives all of our ngā waka principles too? So actually it was our culture. So we have set up a sort of culture group that acts as one voice, or kotahi reo as we call them. They named themselves the one voice of the organisation, and it was them that actually worked on those meeting principles, because it was as much about wellbeing and giving that sense of space, but actually how we express our culture as well, because again it's that link between feeling like you are there for a reason, feeling like you can be included, feeling like you can contribute, and how do we kind of try to capture some principles around, if we're going to be spending time doing this, let's make sure it counts.
So exciting to hear, because I've been sharing a lot with organizations some really exciting research that took place in the US, published in 2020, and it was a 5-year field trial with about 1,000 IT professionals, and they were looking at reducing overload. And the main strategies were increased autonomy. So you decide how you do your work, a hybrid model, rather than feeling you had to come to the workplace. then reducing autonomy to reduce low value work, which primarily meant being able to reduce and the requirement to be in non-productive meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard, and it's interesting because we have put those things in place, but the temptation, is it 100% always absolutely by those guidelines? And does everybody stop exactly at the 50 minutes? No. And that's a work in progress, and that's a muscle you need to build, isn't it? Because you naturally want to be involved in meetings. Like, oh, what are you talking about? I want to be there. Just have me along, Do I have role play? Not really. I just want to be involved in it. Or, oh, one more thing before we go. I know it's 2:50, but, let's make sure we spend the next 10 minutes chatting about something maybe we didn't need to. So, it's actually very challenging, those two aspects, because there's so many competing factors. Like, we all know it's a good thing to do, but actually there's lots going on there. So I wouldn't say we'd totally mastered it in terms of the practice.
One of the other things that came out in this research was this was a global organization working across multiple time zones. So the expectation you were in the office and at meetings at 5 a.m. or 12 at night was really burning people out. And in addition, a kind of an always on, always available culture. And so instead, to shift to more autonomy around meetings, eliminating the low value work and replacing all that meeting attendance with some more effective tracking dashboards, so that people who were involved in a project could see where the status was and get their status updates without going to a meeting. And so I think it's around how can we listen to the frontline experts and design the solutions to the challenges.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because if you figure out why people are meeting and look at how you can actually figure out, whether it's informing or whether it's contributing, and figure out other more efficient ways to do that, that's a really great way to
and
do
empowering
that.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love the Kotahideo group already was on to, we need to look at making our meetings more purposeful, because like you say, it's often the bane of most people's day, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's another one of those really important symbols of culture too, like how you run your meetings and what you do, and how you get involved. It's very symbolic of your culture, I think.
And I like that the Kotahideo group are also looking at how do we make it easy for everyone to contribute?
Yeah.
What do you think has been the biggest learning over the past 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning, probably building on what I was talking about with the meeting principles and the meetings, it's continuous work, isn't it, wellbeing? Because you can put some great things in place, you can listen to the feedback, but you need to keep working at it. The other example probably is flexible working is a really big part of, I think, wellbeing. And to your point, around autonomy, and actually I got control over where I do the work and where I don't do the work. I think we're all learning around what the best approach is in terms of that flexible working, and whether you're, we've got people in a branch and we're trying to be flexible with when they can come in and when they can't, and the times, or when you're in an office and when you're working from home or when you're not working from home. And it's really hard to say this is the one thing that's really successful, because it depends so much on the person, on the team, on the work, on, what's best for your customers. So I think the learning is probably that there's not just one thing you can do. It's a continuous conversation, continuous work, and you need to keep getting feedback and keep having the conversation, because it's not just a once and done and then you move on.
And I think I like that point around there isn't a one best, because we're talking about flexible working, responding to different people's needs, which will A, be different at any point in time, and B, are likely to evolve.
Exactly. We've started talking about you've got to flex within flex, because actually, exactly, we've got these three lenses of me, we, and KB. So what's good for me, what's good for the team, what's good for our Kiwibank customers. You need to put all those lenses onto a given situation. All those things are different. So recognizing that there's a lot of grey in there, and just keep on being intentional and focused about, let's make sure we're creating the best environment for people to be their best, and learn together and recognise we don't always get it right.
And I think the key is being intentional and purposeful. That, if we're saying we want people to come into the office for X time, for what purpose? What will they do? What will that give us? Therefore, who will need to be there? What will be the best time to do it? How often, that. And I think it's been interesting. There's some lovely research coming out on the organizations in the US that were mandating a 5-day-a-week return to office and how badly that's gone. And that they've tended to be organizations that weren't functioning, weren't the most profitable or functioning the best.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, that feeds into the world of work is changing, and that's again why I think you just need to keep talking about it and keep adjusting, learning, because I've got people on my team that started their working life during COVID, so all they knew was working from home. And they're not going to be coming into the office 5 days a week. They'll be like, why should I do that?
And
what do you mean connecting? I connect over social media. What do you mean I can only do it in the office? It's just a new world, and we need to sort of catch up, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, and I think for me there, you're saying you're doubling down on your commitment to flexible working and saying we've got to find flex in the flex.
Yeah.
And saying it's not about one and done or do it or ditch it. It's around how do we really engage with it and make it work optimally for
that's right.
me, we, and KB. I like that.
Yeah, because some in our branches, we've got to be there for our customers. In our contact centre, you've got to be there to answer the phone. But how can we be flexible to make sure we're taking into account individuals and team needs and balancing all of those things? And it's not easy.
And I think there's so much we can do in a hybrid model. And one of the things that we've got to be more creative around, and that is probably one of the more challenging things, is the near peer role modeling. How do we make sure that and mentoring, how do we make sure that happens? And it's just about saying, if it's important, we make time for it, we dedicate time to it. And rather than saying, no, everyone has to be in the office 35 hours a week, so it could happen unexpectedly at some point.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. It's much better to plan for it. And we've learned lots of lessons there too. So as part of both COVID, but also recognising the talent challenge, we have set up remote contact centre teams. And that's hard because from a wellbeing perspective, there's lots of great things about being able to work from home, but there's also lots of wellbeing challenges, and having difficult customer calls. And like you say, having that peer feedback and support and not having someone there can be, it's a different model. And you've got to be really intentional about how we manage the psychosocial risks and provide that support alongside that.
Being in your living room or your kitchen and having the experience of somebody being really toxic to you in what is your home space is something we have to take seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, and I think we need to be careful too sometimes when we're talking about flexible working. It's a good reminder that working from home good, working in the office bad. Sometimes that sort of gets, again, a black and white view, whereas actually, to your point, being intentional about, well, when is it good to be surrounded with support and connection, and when is it, when are there actually some wellbeing challenges when you're working from home in terms of not switching off or not having a third space and not shutting down or taking a break. There's actually quite a lot in there, isn't there, that we need to unpack from a wellbeing perspective.
Around what makes healthy, sustainable work in terms of support, boundaries, all of that stuff. And some of that's easier to do in the office and some of it's easier to do at home, but it doesn't mean it's impossible to do in either space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is that something that Kiwibank is just part of your future, working through that?
Yes, I think so. And I mean, I would say that it is actually part of all organisations' future, whether they know it or not. I think it's happening. And I think it's about that intentional conversation, as you say, and being really clear on actually what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve and how are they best achieved, which is actually the best way to look at it, rather than are you at home or not.
Yeah, so it's purpose-driven rather than we have to be able to control and see everybody to be
outcome-driven. Yeah, that's right. To your point earlier, I think that's the which again for some might be a new way of looking at performance or outputs.
There are some more traditional organizations where the expectation was that you had visual oversight.
Yeah.
And that's how our workplaces were designed. But there's a lot of things that are hanging around since the early days of the Industrial Revolution that it's high time we updated.
That's right. And it's happening whether we like it or not. And it's a bit like culture too, as I always say, you've got a culture, whether you've been intentional or not, you have a culture, and as your culture intentionally supporting wellbeing or not, it's time to get curious about it.
Nice. And tell me, in terms of the wider conversation, what are the skills that you most want to develop in your leaders and all your people? What are the priorities for you?
So that's a great question because we are an organisation that is transforming and changing. So for us, building skills for people to be flexible and adaptive has been a priority for us. And we've actually, when we were thinking about how to build those skills, we probably took a bit of a non-traditional approach because I think in the past, people would start with leadership programs around how to manage people through change. We sort of turned that a bit on its head and we've started with a leadership program for everyone. We're saying everybody is a leader. We have a program called Navigator, which so far about 650 odd people have been through with the intention for everyone to go through that. And the skills that we're trying to develop is this sort of self-navigation, adaptability, understanding yourself, having conversations about what you need, and how you navigate through change and learning, among other things. Because actually we might not be able to put our finger on what it is that's changing. It's about having that mindset and some key skills in your toolkit to be able to deal with that when time comes to it. And then as we work through individuals, then we can look at, and therefore, how do you double down on skills for managers to lead through change and enterprise leaders, but actually starting with that, everyone is a leader and you need to manage yourself through change and get clear on what you need. Is a really important building block to that.
This is just grist to my mill. It's so exciting because if we're talking about the skills we need to navigate uncertainty and change, it's the only skill that leaders might need that isn't in the Navigator program is the letting go, the not being the expert in the room, being willing to really empower and collaborate.
Yep, agree.
Because
that's hard. That's hard for a manager, isn't it? Because it's like, well, hey, that's my job. What do I do then?
and if I'm not doing that, what's my value? Oh my word, you have so much else to offer. That's the conversation I think we need for leaders. And one of the things I've been working on is the concept of way power and saying that in in traditional stable times, willpower will take you a long way. In uncertainty and change, you need way power, which is the skill set to find a way to be able to empower, to collaborate, to be agile, to respond, to learn fast, fail forward, learn from mistakes rather than blaming and punishing each other. And I think in the leadership space, it's around being able to empower and collaborate, but to inspire confidence in people that the future is uncertain. And I can't tell you we will get to X, but I can tell you that we have some really robust processes. We are learning as fast as anybody else. And when we follow our process, we have the best chance of landing in the best possible place. So, it's not the same as saying we're going over there, come hell or high water. It's saying we're heading in this direction.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very different kind of leadership. And it still needs people who can inspire hope and motivate people, but it's a very different style, I think.
I completely agree. And all of those things you were talking about just resonate so clearly with me. And that's why we're called our Leading Self Program Navigator, because it's about finding the way. It's all
we need wayfinders with way power.
Wonderful things you said, exactly. And then for leading change for the leaders, I always like William Bridges' way of being clear about what leaders need to be able to do through change, and that's be clear on the purpose, be clear on the picture, be clear on what the plan is to get there, and be clear on the part that everyone has to play. So the 4 Ps of change, and if they can get that right, then actually that's really powerful.
Lovely. And it's a challenge it's almost a challenge for people who've had a more traditional leadership style to go, you still have value when you let go, when you empower, when you enable people to challenge you and ask questions, and when you can say, that's a better idea than mine, let's take it on board.
Yes. Yeah. I completely agree. And they've got a really valuable role because they need to look up and actually say, what's the problem we're really trying to solve? And again, linking to wellbeing, there's so much busyness, there's so much on. Actually, we need those leaders to be clearing the way and being clear on what's the priorities, what's the problem we've got to solve, and what are we going to stop doing as a result?
Huge.
Yeah.
And actually, here's a question, which might seem a little bit left field, but one of the things that I'm often talking about these days with leaders is the idea that contemporary leadership is challenging because you can't put on your expert armor. It requires you to be more vulnerable, but it also requires you to put your own psychological house in order.
Yeah.
To be able to respond rather than react, to know what your triggers are and not get hooked by them. It actually requires quite a lot of deep work and I think, well-being at its core, we're talking self-awareness, self-regulation, self-compassion. And for some of us, that's not what we expected to have to do in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, it is probably, and I don't think that's left field, because if you're talking about leadership development, actually at the senior levels, I think self-awareness is it. That's actually it. It's about having an understanding of yourself and your impact. Absolutely, on others. So, not left field at all. I think that's really important, and that's the work.
It is the work. I think it is the hard, heavy lifting of leadership. Because I'm always saying who you are is how you lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't just read a book and get a new tool. You dig deep and do some big work that enables you to stop tripping yourself up and responding unhelpfully or limiting certain people or addressing your unconscious bias.
Yeah, because actually bringing it back to culture, the start of the conversation, when we did our culture work, we found so clearly the message was so strong that leaders were the enablers for culture. And if you had leaders doing all those good things we just talked about, then you have your culture enabled, and that's the catalyst for culture change, is actually leaders. And a bad culture and bad leaders have a direct correlation.
Yeah, I think about Gervais Bush's work on emotional contagion in organizations.
Yes.
We're all contagious, and leaders are more contagious than anyone else.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So the bigger shapers of culture. And so in terms of main priorities, what would they be?
So continuing the work on culture, continuing the listening, continuing the getting clear on what's working and what we need to keep working on or do differently in terms of bringing our ngā waka to life, continuing the leadership development for self, for teams, for those enterprise leaders as well, and trying to enable all of that through actually good systems, processes and tools. So that's really at the heart of our people strategy, but that culture and wellbeing and purpose lens sort of overhang all of those things.
And this is such an important point that I think many organizations miss, that to support well-being, you do need good systems, processes, and tools.
Yeah, you do, because there's nothing worse for your well-being than a really complex, unwieldy, awful process or system or something that's unusable and makes you feel stupid or like you can't do your job. Right, so everything has to be simple and easy and accessible. That's what we aim for, particularly when it comes to people processes, because in order for people to be able to do their jobs, and at Kiwibank, jobs are helping our customers, you want to make everything else as easy as possible so you can have great conversations with your customers and your people.
I love this. And it is about ways of working that enable well-being. And I guess it's seeing well-being as not divorced from the fundamental purpose of the organization, but that when you can have processes and tools that enable well-being, they enable performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, they do.
Oh, I'm sitting here thinking, I could have had a career in Kiwibank. I love this organization. Right. I'm a consultant at heart, never an organization joiner. But with this work, I am meeting organizations that I think I so love the values and culture that you're developing, that you feel really attractive organizations. That's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. One of our partners or suppliers that we worked with last week said to me, it's amazing the intangible collective enthusiasm and pride is how he described it that I feel when I come in here, which I thought sums it up really nicely. And I think the point is everyone can see the potential. So we don't feel like we've made it, but we can see the potential and we're really committed to it, which I think is really exciting.
And are already proud of the way you're working.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, it is such a treat to get to dive into what's working and what you're doing well. And is there anything else that you would like, that you're proud of in what you're doing at Kiwibank, in how Kiwibank is working with its people, that you'd like to share?
I could literally talk about it all day. The other thing which relates to wellbeing, but also the culture piece, is the work we're doing to help people build a career and stay here. And I think that I'm really proud of that, because we've been really intentional about trying to get opportunities for our people, and our internal mobility stats have completely rocketed in the last few years. So people are moving, developing opportunities, and, to your point earlier, it's about developing the self-awareness and the growth and having those development conversations, which again, it's so important for well-being, isn't it? Because it's that self-actualization piece of, if I stay here, I feel like I can really fulfill my own potential. So that sort of emphasis on talent and career development, I think, would be another one that I would talk about at length in terms of
absolutely.
Being really important from a wellbeing perspective too, which again is it's not a check in the box thing. It's about being really committed to growing your own people and ensuring that you're looking internally for opportunities rather than always looking externally as well.
And that flexibility to allow people to identify their strengths and move sideways. Yeah. Sometimes, Oh, I'm glad we didn't finish without discussing that. It's such a huge, shift in thinking about an organization as its purpose, rather than the purpose being to enable people to live fulfilling careers and lives.
Absolutely.
Charlotte, thank you for joining me today. I know our listeners will take away ideas and practical actions and be inspired that organizations can work in this way. I'll put links in the show notes to Kiwibank's Kawaka, to the authors whose work we've mentioned, and a link to the Making Work Better report.
I have really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you so much for having me, and it's lovely to get to see you.
Really lovely to get to meet face to face. Thank you, Charlotte. You've been listening to Making Work Better, recorded for RFM Dunedin. To learn more about how you can make work better for yourself, your team, or your workplace, keep listening to this series and go to nziwr.co.nz to download your free copy of the Making Work Better report. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate the podcast to help others who might benefit from it find it more easily.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.